Alright, so we've seen the new iPhone 13 come out, and we've seen that cinematic mode, one of their big selling points for the phone. It's finally a feature that's out. I really wanted to see it on the 12, but it's out on the 13 now. Now, we've all seen the bigger creators with their reviews and their tests, and the footage looks fine. It looks good. There's nothing I have against it, but I couldn't help but think, can I recreate that using the iPhone 12 Pro? And spoiler alert, you kinda can. And I'm gonna show you how to do that in this video. Let's dive into it. Hey there, my name's Jared, welcome back. Glad you're here. If you're at all interested in tech or ways to boost your video production or conversations around content creation, this is the channel for you. And if you are interested in any of that, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll greatly appreciate it. All right, let's dive into cinematic mode on the iPhone 12 Pro. I had to grab a little Joby GorillaPod here because it's gonna work better if it's stabilized. That's what I've noticed. So we're gonna test this on a little tripod here. Now, since we can't get cinematic mode on the built-in camera app, we need to download an app called Focos Live. This is an app that takes advantage of the Li-Dar scanner built into the iPhone 12 Pro so that we can actually get depth of field and some form of cinematic look to our footage. All right, so let's open up Focos Live. And this is what the dashboard here looks like. You can take a portrait video, you can even edit videos in the app. There's a lot you can do just in the app itself. Now, full disclosure, there's two versions of the app. There's the free version and there's the pro version. I do believe the pro version I think it's still $15. That's what I paid for it. And it unlocks a lot more features for you, and I'm gonna go into that in just a second, but just so you know, there are two features for this app. It's not a subscription, it is a one-time payment, which isn't bad, but just thought you'd wanna know before we got any deeper into this. All right, let's take a portrait video. And it first defaults to the 1x lens, because I think that's the lens that uses the Li-Dar scanner. I think that's the only lens that uses the Li-Dar scanner. And as you can tell, with the record button, where that record button is, you could actually tell what's in depth of field or not. You can see where the tripod is, you can see where the camera is, and if I put my water bottle in place there, you can see that too. You can see the light that's right there. So you can see the depth through the Li-Dar scanner. I'm gonna have to scoot back a little bit to see how this looks in portrait mode, so, okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see how this looks. This is what it looks like in portrait mode. I may not be framed all that well, but this is what it generally looks like. Just from the recording of it, we can still edit things, we can still make it look a little bit better, but this is kind of what it generally looks like. You're probably seeing a little bit of halo around the hair. That's just the computational photography, and what that does, that's how you can tell it's done over software, not done through a natural lens depth of field that you would get with like a Sony a7C. But overall, I still think this doesn't look too far off from the iPhone 13 Pro. All right, let's take a look at that. We're gonna select it, click edit, and then we can actually edit through all of the footage. It seems like the focus is hunting a little bit. It seems like the problem I had on my Panasonic is that it would continue to focus hunt a lot, and you're not really gonna see it on this Sony, but on this, you're like, I'm out of focus here, and then I think I pop back in focus. Yeah, I'm like in and out of focus quite a bit. Now, although I was not in focus for a majority of this video, we can actually edit the focus in post, which is really cool. So we just click on Aperture, and we click on Focus, and we're gonna figure out where I am in the focus. It looks like I'm right there. So it was trying to use the autofocus of the lens and the Li-Dar scanner to try to calculate the depth, and it just didn't look that great. So that looks a lot better now. There we go. Now that the focus is locked in, it looks a lot better, and you can actually do that in post, which you can't really do that with Sony. You can't do that. It's a point for the iPhone. I'll give the iPhone that. Okay, so now we can edit the aperture as well. We can edit how much blur there is in the background. So we are at what is this, 3.6, which actually isn't bad. 3.6 is not bad. If you want more blur, you just lower this number right here. So if you want more blur, you go to the lower number. You could go all the way down to 1.4 if it's really, really blurry. Or if you want everything in focus, you go up to f20. So you get those two options. Now I'm gonna go down to I'm gonna go with F4 here, just because I think that's the most natural look for like an iPhone and when we are talking about digital blur. If we go down to like f1.4, it doesn't, I mean, as you can tell, my fingers are out of focus here, and things just don't look very good. I mean, that just doesn't look great. So we're gonna go ahead and move that back to f4, where more things are in focus. That doesn't look terrible. That looks pretty comparable to the iPhone 13 Pro from what I could tell. Now we could actually do all sorts of editing here, from adding filters. You could even add a LUT if you have your own LUTs. We can add color correction. We can change the exposure, brightness, contrast, color temperatures, saturation hues, all that good stuff that you're able to edit all the time. I prefer to edit that in Final Cut Pro, but this is a really great start here if you want to just play around with it. If you're just using your phone, this is a great start here. You can even denoise stuff, or add noise, add grain if you want to, like a grain vibe for something. I don't know what you'd want that for. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's export the video. Now we can export this video, and we have some settings down here at the bottom that we can play around with. Now the 1080p, we can export it at 4K, 30 frames per second at 100% export quality. This is 251 megabytes right there. Now, just as a disclaimer, I think if you want to export anything at 4K at 100% quality, you will need to get that Pro version. I think it's just that $15. I do think it's worth it. Whoa. I do think it's worth it because you do get that 100% quality export, plus you're in 4K, 30 frames per second. It's going to look really nice, so I think it's worth it. But again, it's $15. Just want to let you know about that. So we just click export, and we wait. Now, while this finishes exporting, I think the one thing to note here is that this still isn't quite up to the par of the iPhone 13 cinematic mode, but I think this is a pretty close mimic of that cinematic mode. It's not gonna have all the features of it, but it's pretty dang close. And what's cool is it actually exports it back into your photo library, so it's right there, fully exported, and it actually, that looks better than it looked in the preview in the app. So that exported very well. The focus looks good. The aperture looks great. I could have framed myself a bit better in this test, but you get the general idea. Now, I think the thing is, this is going to be used for vlogging for the most part. So let's switch it to the front-facing camera, which I think is what people are going to want to see more of, is the front-facing camera. So we're going to just try that and see how that looks in terms of cinematic mode. I don't know if this is going to work out great, but we can try it. All right, so this is the front-facing camera of the iPhone 12 Pro using Focos Live. I typically look over at this side of the camera, not this side, so that's where the camera is. But yeah, overall, I don't think I'm not seeing any background blur or any portrait anything so far. It looks like everything's in focus as far as I can tell from this angle here. But maybe we can change that in editing. All right, so let's have that. It looks like everything's in focus. It looks like your typical front-facing camera. Now we're gonna see if it adds any digital background blur to it. I think it definitely does. Oh, it did add blur. Oh, that's actually cool. Okay, so you can actually have the blur, and it has the focus, and oh wow, it's even doing facial detection. Look at that. It even detects my face throughout the entire thing. We didn't see that on the I didn't see that on the wide lens, which is supposed to be the good lens. This is the front-facing camera here. Wow, that looks. Hold up. That's impressive for a front-facing camera. I've tested this multiple times on this camera. This is the best it's looked. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. This is wow, that's the best that this has looked I've seen. We can still edit the aperture size, so we're gonna go down so we can edit that to f1.7. Again, I kind of like it around the f4 range. I think that's what looks a little bit more natural for this digital blur that we're working with here. If we're working with a natural blur like with the Sony a7C, I'm filming at f2 right now, so that's a lot different, and it's gonna look a lot more natural. You're not gonna see the haloing around the head or the hair, that kind of thing. But I am impressed. Like, wow, I'm impressed. That's for a front-facing camera. we take that. I will take that any day of the week. Now, as this exports, what I could definitely tell is that if the front-facing camera looks this good, this could totally help the vlog game for sure. Now, I think what is going to be the drawback here is going to be your lighting situation. That's always the case with cameras, that if you have optimal lighting, which I have some okay lighting right now, but if you have optimal lighting, the camera's gonna look great. That's kind of always my go-to, is the better lighting you have, the better your camera's gonna look, even if you have a phone. So, I mean, it's really gonna depend, I think, on the lighting situations, and if you have low light, I don't think it's gonna look that good. But I think if you're in really decent lighting conditions, we're gonna get this result, and that's really good. Now, looking at this, it's really good. My ear's kind of in and out of focus a little bit here. The background looks a little funky here. My hand, when it moves around, oh yeah, my finger pointing. You could definitely tell it's like trying to mask out my finger to put it into focus. If I were to re-export this, I would probably I probably would turn the aperture up a bit and go maybe 6.0, even 8.0, just to try to keep things more in focus, and I would lock the focus in place as well if I were to re-export this. So overall, is this as good as the iPhone 13 Pro? I don't know. I'd love to see and check with the iPhone 13 Pro. I'd love to compare it against. I just don't have access to one, but I think it would be definitely interesting to test these two side by side. But is this a good substitute? Is Focos Live on a 12 Pro a good substitute? I definitely think it is. Now, I just think this is gonna do really great for the vloggers, anybody that films on their phone. Again, more people are filming and taking photos on this thing. You don't need to get a giant, camera rig that's super expensive. If you're just gonna upgrade your phone anyway, you have a really solid camera setup in your pocket. I mean, that's what this is all about, really. That's the bigger conversation here. Now, one thing I would love to see Apple do is I would love to see them increase the sensor size on the cameras. These are 12 megapixel sensors, and it's the same thing on the 13 Pro. It's the 12 megapixels. Again, I'd love just to get a little bit more resolution out of my photos and videos, and so I think just upping the sensor size would be great. Again, I know what that's going to do. It's going to increase this camera bump even bigger. It's already huge on the 13 Pro, so it probably is not necessarily totally worth it, but I'd love to see Apple maybe experiment with that. Love to see how that would impact the iPhone, but yeah, overall, still fantastic. Can't complain. Now, I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think about the 12 Pro with Focos Live compared to the 13 Pro? If you've seen the footage, what do you think? Do you think one's better than the other? Would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. But with that, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We'd greatly appreciate it. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.